It's no word of a lie that I'm always on the lookout for ways to reduce costs of the reptile shed. Trying to make things cheaper and more cost effective, all the while improving the lives the animals live. We cut on cost but not quality. And on that note, the new saga begins of cutting costs and breeding my own feeder insects. Of course, you've already seen the roach colony. Population booming, fully established and ready to go. Dubia roaches are a very good source of protein with a reasonable but not too high nor low fat content. But variety is almost always key. The next feeder setup is Morioworms, a common treat for Roscoe and Charlie, but sadly too large for the geckos. But to start a healthy colony, and because these guys are quite cheap given they're easy to breed and readily available. So, like the perfectly normal human I'm known to be, I bought 1/2 kilogram of worms. These Morio worms will eventually turn into beetles, but for now that'll have to wait. They turn from worm to pupae and then into beetle. This takes time though. They spend most of their time below the surface, so a nice covering of bran will provide a dry, edible substrate. An interesting note in their development: occasionally shedding their skin to aid growth. The exoskeleton's constricting, so occasionally shedding allows a continuous but slow growth. The newly exposed exoskeleton is much softer than the previous, leaving the worm vulnerable. Taking some time to harden, we end up with varying stages of worms. Some newly shed, some with a semi-hardened exoskeleton, and the rest with a fully formed, solid skeleton. The tub's evidently rather dull, and there's not much to look at or interact with. And I may in the future, but no time soon, look into seeing whether a bioactive naturalistic setup might be a feasible option for breeding these guys. But for now it's a simple case of clearing out the substrate every once in a while, before it becomes too rancid. Which begs the question, is a self-sustaining enclosure even a possible option for these guys in this quantity? They'll constantly upturn the soil, causing difficulty for plants to take root and create a stable base. And without the plants, the worm waste likely won't be broken down properly, causing it to build up and stagnate the setup. So we'll have to see. Maybe I'll run some small test setups to see what works. The downside to Morio worms, and one of the main reasons they can't be relied upon as a staple food source, they've got a very high calcium to phosphorus ratio, meaning they contain much more phosphorus than calcium. In general, reptiles need slightly more calcium than phosphorus in their diet, otherwise they risk developing MBD, metabolic bone disease. Most often caused by a lack of calcium in the diet, causing the bones to develop poorly, causing harmful irregularities, or in some cases, the body, desperate for calcium, resorts to stripping it from the bones, leading to incredibly brittle bones prone to breaking. Now on the other end of the scale, you can feed too much calcium, in which the body often creates calcium deposits around the body and on the skeleton, lacking a better alternate option. And that's why it's important for certain food items to be lightly dusted in calcium powder before feeding, to help ensure the calcium to phosphorus ratio is much more even. But not to be done every single feed, every single day. 2 to 3 times a week is normally enough. Now when it comes to Charlie, I normally just feed by hand. However, with Roscoe, I utilise a great opportunity for enrichment. I feed various dusted worms to ensure the calcium's received, and afterwards, worms can be released straight into the substrate into the enclosure. And so long as you've got the correct substrate, there's no need to worry about impaction. Roscoe's claws are perfectly designed for digging, and often in the wild they'll dig burrows, hide from the heat, safety, and to find their next meal. Roscoe's tongue leads him straight to the entry site, and from there it's a game of cat and mouse, exhibiting a natural behaviour and engaging his brain while utilising instincts and senses, all of which being incorporated into his new enclosure design. A plan on the way to help improve his life with me. It's time to leave the worms to settle in to munch on their cantaloupe, red pepper and other veg. Once we've completed the life cycle with some pupae and beetles in the tub, I'll do an update and maybe even lead into a care guide for other keepers to do the same, and see how I keep mine. But for now, it's my first time attempting to breed Morios, so we'll have to see how it goes. And as I mentioned earlier in the video, this is a saga. There's more additions to the SG Animals universe, and they'll be featured with us shortly.